Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today we are talking about risky play. I woke up one day last month and listened to the news and heard that the Canadian Pediatric Society, I think I've got that right, had come out with a report encouraging doctors to encourage families to let their kids and even encourage their kids to participate in risky play. That actually made me super happy because I really had a sense of, watching my own kids interact and working in schools and working with families throughout the years, that there had been, a real downturn in what we let kids do or what we feel comfortable letting kids do. I'm actually going to ask you to get a little bit uncomfortable with this, and we are going to talk about it, but their kids don't climb and run and play with sticks the way that they used to. And I think that it's understandable, of course, because we all want our kids to not get hurt and to be safe. However, there are risks in not letting them participate in risky play. But first, let's talk about what exactly risky play is. Then we're going to talk about, I'm just going to briefly go over the benefits of risky play. And then as a parenting coach, the reason I'm talking to you about this is because I talk to so many of you, and of course I'm a mom, and so I know how it can be hard. So I have some tips for you about, what we can do to really manage our own anxiety and let kids experience all of the benefits of risky play. So I've written down the categories. I'm just going to consult that. So the categories of risky play, there are 7 categories that experts agree on. Playing at heights, so climbing trees, being at the top of the climbing structure, etc., even, standing on chairs or being on counters or whatever. Playing at speed, so running fast, riding their scooters fast, riding their bikes fast, etc. Playing with tools, so, actual tools, like you've probably heard of some of those adventure playgrounds where they have saws and hammers and things for kids to play with, but playing with, actual tools or using stones or sticks or whatever as tools. Play involving potential danger such as fire and water. You think about how if you've ever had a campfire or a bonfire, kids are always drawn to sticking sticks in the fire or, throwing things in the fire to see how they burn. And also whenever we're near bodies of water, kids are always drawn to splashing and throwing things in and really, playing by the river and all of those things. Let's see, the 5th category is rough and tumble play. So, pretend sword play with sticks or wrestling or anything that's really physical in that rough and tumble, rough housing, which, I encourage you to do with your kids all the time. Playing with disappearing, so hiding in the bushes, hiding behind things, being out of sight of adults or not being able to see the other adults. And then finally, play involving impact, so crashing into things, just that sort of like that level of impact. So those are the categories that the experts agreed on. And I just want to also take a minute here to differentiate playing risky play and actual danger. Like, this doesn't mean that we're going to let our kids play next to the road with no fence and, cars whizzing by. It doesn't mean that we're going to let them stop wearing their helmets when they're riding their bikes. What this is, stuff that is actually, yes, there is the potential for them to get hurt, but it's more unlikely. So what I read when I was doing the research for this episode is that, let me just check my notes here, a child would have to play outside for 3 hours a day for 10 years for anything serious enough that would involve medical attention to happen. So yes, it is, they could get a broken arm or something like that. But mostly what we're talking about, the risks here are bumps, bruises, cuts, scrapes, that kind of thing. We're not talking about, risk for serious injury. And of course, we want this to be age appropriate. And we don't want kids to play, for example, the fire thing. Of course, they have to be supervised if they're by fire or water, but we want to let them within that within reason, let them experiment with that risky play while we're there to back them up. Okay, so the benefits of risky play are so many. So it can help kids be more resilient. So, they fall down, they get up, they dust themselves off again. And remember, resilience, you've heard me say this a million times. Resilience isn't that we don't get upset. Resilience is that we get upset and recover. So with risky play, they have the potential for like literal upsets, falling over, falling down, things not going as planned. And then they know that they can handle it and recover. Executive function skills are really, really potentially there for development with risky play. So they have to think about sequencing, like what comes first. They have to think about problem solving, planning, all of those, all the different executive function skills are developed through play. And, I should have said this off the top, but one thing that we know about children is that play is the work of childhood, right? That's how they learn and that's how they develop. And that play is so, so important. And unstructured play over and over again is shown to be so important. And risky play is one of those big parts of unstructured play and of that work of childhood. So this is where the learning happens, right? When we're not stepping in. I've heard stories of, my mentor told me that a preschool teacher told her that children don't know how to walk on bumpy surfaces anymore because their parents are picking them up and carrying them over bumpy surfaces. So when potentially because the child might trip and fall on a bumpy surface, right? So when we step in to prevent the risk from happening, what we're really doing is preventing the learning. So executive function skills are going to be developing through this risky play. Their confidence is going to develop through the risky play. So, they look at that apple tree and think, I can't possibly climb up it. And then they try and they do it and they get up to the top and they feel great about themselves, right? They feel so good about what they've accomplished or working on. I remember when my daughter was working on the monkey bars. When she finally could do the monkey bars, she felt so good about herself. I remember her saying, Mama, I did it, right? So there's that confidence piece that comes through risky play. Risk assessment. Kids don't learn what is too much until they've had a chance to experience it, right? Or even come to the edge of experiencing it. I couldn't find the research I was looking for it for this episode, but I remember I was told by pretty sure it was Lynn Lyons. I'm not 100% sure because I couldn't find it, that if we don't let kids experience risk when they're younger, they put it off until older years because at some point, we do need to learn risk assessment, right? We do need to learn where's my edge? What can I handle? What's too much? And if they don't learn it when they're younger, they're going to learn it when they're older. And then the potential for harm is much greater when kids are older, right? So we really want to let them do risky play so that they will develop that sense of risk assessment and risk management. What's too much? Where's the line, right? I remember once when my daughter was little, she was climbing on a climber at the playground and she really liked to climb and it was very risk managed because it had that bouncy rubber stuff at the bottom and there were ropes all along, so if she fell down she would kind of bounce between the ropes and not hit the ground hard. So I would let her climb as far as she felt comfortable, and she would talk to herself as she was climbing, and I'm talking she was little, like under 2 probably, as she was climbing, and she would say to herself, is this too high? Is this too high? Is this too high? And then she would say, that's high enough. I could hear her talking as she was determining how high it was, right? And how if she felt comfortable going any higher. And really, like, that's another thing I think that's a benefit of letting kids do risky play is they learn to touch base with themselves and to tune into themselves and to develop their own sense of their internal spidey sense of like, do I feel safe here? Is this okay? And they get to that edge of like, attuning to their own brain and body messages. And if we're the ones that are stepping in and saying, stop, that's too high, or you're high enough, they never get a sense to test that with themselves and to check in with that with themselves. So confidence, definitely. Risk assessment is super important. Also creativity. Like if we let kids have some more free reign with things that are potentially risky, that's opening up a whole bunch of elements to them. We talked about the tools, letting them use use the sticks. I remember when I was in teachers college, there was a rule that kids couldn't touch sticks, leaves, or snow on the playground because it was too risky. They weren't allowed to even touch those things because I guess they were worried about liability. Well, what could you play with, other than sports equipment? There was nothing left to play with. So their sense of creativity got really stifled. I remember my kids' school, the principal, a new principal came in and actually started letting them build forts with the sticks, which was great because they introduced this whole new element of play, right? When they could do that. And I think the last benefit that I want to talk about is focus. Kids can really, like, when they are allowed to get into that flow, and the, risky play is got that element of flow, right? Flow comes when it's something that's a little bit challenging and also really interesting. So that's when we get into that flow sense. I'm not even going to attempt to say the name of the Czech thinker who came up with that flow state, but it's when something is both challenging and interesting to us that we get into that flow state. That's when we've got lots of brain development, and when we get that really serious focus where it feels like time, it was a blink of an eye, but a lot of time has passed. So many great benefits to really letting our kids do all of this risky play. And I actually was contacted by a news outlet when this study came out. They interviewed me about risky play, and one of the questions was, how do we encourage our kids to do more risky play? And my answer was, we don't actually have to encourage them. We just have to let them. This is all stuff that comes very naturally to kids that they want to do. They're so curiosity driven. And again, that play is how they learn. So why is it hard? It makes us anxious, right? That is why it is so hard to let kids do risky play, because it makes us anxious. We don't want them to get hurt. We don't want anything bad to happen to them. Remind yourself that the study that I just said to you, the kids would have to play outside 3 hours a day for 10 years for the risk of anything that required medical attention to happen. That's statistically. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess that could means that something could happen if they played outside for 3 hours a day for the first 10 years of their life. They may end up with a broken bone. They may end up with some sort of serious injury like that. I also have heard that when kids do experience an injury, it actually makes them more safe. Again, I don't know if I could put my finger on that research, but that when kids do experience, when they do experience some sort of an injury, then they actually, are less risk later on. So how can we manage our own anxiety when our kids are doing risky play? If this is something that's a real struggle for you, I would suggest that you get some help around your anxiety. A book that I love for adults for helping them to manage your anxiety, it's called Rewire Your Anxious Brain. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's a really, really great resource for helping you overcome manage your anxiety. Anxiety is always going to be there probably, but whether it's manageable or not manageable, that's the key. So if that's an issue for you and you're listening to this, like, I could never let my kids, climb trees or play next to a bonfire or whatever, take a look, and maybe you need to get a little bit of support around your own anxiety. If you just got garden variety, run-of-the-mill anxiety, remind yourself of our anti-anxiety phrase: they can handle this, right? I can handle this. Anxiety is an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of the resources we have available. So remind yourself, you can handle it, they can handle it. I just read something really great, a suggestion while I was doing the research for this, which is to give yourself the 17-second rule. So if your kids are doing something that you're like, oh, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to, manage this, watch for 17 seconds. If it helps you, you can count, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi for 17 seconds and see if they can figure it out. Most of the time, as I said, we just have to step back and let them, and they will figure it out. So remember that 17-second rule. One thing that we really want to think about, along with managing our own anxiety, is we don't want to make them anxious either. So one thing that, my favorite anxiety specialist, Lynn Lyons, talks about is what she hears so much today is that safety chatter. Watch out, be careful. don't slip, get down from there. You go to the playground, you're going to hear this, right? Or if you go on a hiking trail or, anywhere where there is that element that's possible for the risky play, is you're going to hear safety chatter. So you really, really want to avoid safety chatter. Lynn says that actually really increases our children's anxiety. And I would argue that it probably doesn't make them any safer, but it just makes them more anxious. So avoid that safety chatter. And what can you do instead though? Okay, so say you've got the 17-second rule, or you really do feel like you need to say something. I want you to think about two areas. You want to think about saying what you can say to encourage awareness and what you can say to encourage problem solving. So some ideas in that area. Say your kid is climbing a tree and you're a little bit nervous that that maybe they're not up to it. You might say something like, notice how there's a big gap between where your next hold is going to be, and ask them, and if you can combine the encouraging awareness and problem solving and ask them, what's your plan for how you're going to get to the next spot, right? So asking them to notice where they are in space or notice things about their surroundings. You can say something like, do you see that, big hole in the ground? I'm just making things up. Or how are you feeling? Are you feeling confident? Getting them to check in with themselves, right? So this is all the encouraging awareness phrases. So noticing, asking them to just pay attention to what they're doing. Those are all really great ways to encourage awareness. And that's actually going to help you feel better, and it's going to help them be safer when they're doing the risky play. And again, I mentioned the problem solving. So if they're stuck, and you can even do this even if you're not anxious, but they are stuck. I remember my kids, sometimes they would climb up and they would say like, I need to get, help me down. And I had a rule that if they needed help down, then they wouldn't be able to climb that high next time. I don't know how I came up with that, but it might have been just because I was lazy and I didn't feel like getting up off the bench to go and help them get down off the climber, if I'm being totally honest. But if they wanted to be able to climb high, they had to get down themselves. They also had to get up themselves, right? I wasn't going to help them up to anything. This is a bit of an aside. Of course, I would help them if they really needed help, but I really wanted to encourage them to see if they could figure it out themselves. So if they're like, I can't get down, then you can ask them, okay, well, look around. What's your plan? Think where you can. I remember this also from my rock climbing days. Sometimes you think you were stuck and there wasn't a hold. And if you just looked a little bit more, you could see something that you might be able to grab onto, right? So I hope this was helpful. I was just so happy, as I mentioned, when I did hear this about that encouraging risky play. We want to really remind ourselves of the benefits, even when we're feeling anxious. And, I guess the risks of not letting kids have risky play are really the opposite of all what the benefits were, that they won't be able to learn through play, and they won't develop that confidence, and they will be more anxious if we won't let them do things and we're always doing the safety chatter. So remind yourself that it's going to be worth it, even if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. I said in the beginning that we were going to be a little bit uncomfortable in this episode, but I think your children will really thank you for it. And, I mentioned being lazy and sitting on the bench. This is another side benefit, is when kids are really engaged in play, that can really give us a chance to sit, be with our thoughts, have a few moments of quiet to ourselves, and really just like let them get so engrossed in play. One of my favorite authors, one of my favorite books is the book It's Okay Not to Share by Heather Schumacher. I got to get her on the podcast. She talks about how kids really need unstructured play, like at least an hour a day of unstructured play. So this is really one way that you can, the kids are like, I'm bored. See if you can encourage some of these avenues of risky play that will really help them get engrossed and really be able to do that unstructured play. The biggest challenge for us is stepping back, letting them do it, and managing our own anxiety. I hope this was helpful for you. Please share this episode with a friend. This would be a great thing to talk about with your other parent friends. And I would love to hear how it went for you. We have a lovely, beautiful, large free Facebook group where you can share your thoughts on this episode or anything else. That is called Reimagine Peaceful Parenting with Sarah Rosensweet. And please share this episode with a friend. And I will see you next time on the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.